Welcome to my Financial Friday live stream. We come to you every single Friday at 12 noon with great information to help you drive your financial future and really make decisions, whether it has to do with your mortgage, whether it has to do with your investments, whether it has to do with anything related to you and your financial needs. I want to make sure that I'm here not just to get you into debt, but to help get you out of debt and to build wealth through homeownership and through every other avenue I can. So let's get started with our Financial Friday. All right, well, welcome again to our Financial Friday. Today, we are going to be having a special guest. So many times you guys have to hear from me and hear me talk about, 60 minutes of lots of different things. But today, I'm actually going to have a special guest here. I'll introduce in a moment. Excuse me. But my topic today is how to pay for my kids to go to college. And I think it's something that we don't think about enough. We've talked about retirement planning, we've talked about investments, but the reality is college education is super, super expensive, and it's been continuing to grow out of control on the cost of college education, and it's continued to grow out of control on student loan debt and how much people are having to pay in monthly payments and how much debt load they're carrying for paying off these student loans. And so I want to talk to you about investment options and what you should be thinking about if you have kids that are going to be going to college down the road and you're just not sure, hey, John, how do I even do this? What's the first step in investing to a college education? And so I'm going to bring in my special guest. Cody O'Keefe, let's bring in Cody. Welcome, Cody.
Hey, John, thanks for having me.
Absolutely welcome. We are lucky to have Cody here. Not only are we lucky to have Cody here, we're lucky that Cody's here. So we joined live before the live broadcast about 5 minutes early, and Cody's desk and his office looked absolutely amazing, but there was no Cody, and no Cody to be found. His chair was empty. I picked up my cell phone and I called him just to make sure everything was okay, and Cody didn't answer. But I could hear a little bit of like noises in the background, and I didn't know what it was. And lo and behold, about 20 seconds before we're ready to go live, and Cody flies into the room, and Cody had locked himself out of his office. So he had his keys on the desk right next to him. I'm in here staring at the keys, but I couldn't help him out very much. But he's human just like I am, got here just in the nick of time. So Cody, great job in timing that perfectly and giving me a great story to kick us off today.
Hey, it's any way we can break the ice and just get it started with a good laugh. It's going to be a good call.
You've done good. So Cody, tell us a little bit about you. Who are you? How long you been in the industry? Genuinely, what qualifies you to even be talking to us today?
Gotcha. So I am a financial advisor here at WGG Wealth Partners. We're a private investment firm here in East Roseville. So my experience, I've been in the financial industry since 2008. Started working as an advisor, working directly with clients in 2013. Our practice, we currently manage a little over $2 billion in assets. We're about 45 employees. About a third of us are advisors. The rest are support staff in some other shape or form. My experience and expertise is in financial planning. So creating customized financial plan that covers retirement, college planning, and a variety of other goals, as well as doing investment management. So we create and manage our own portfolios that are unique to each one of our clients.
Got it. Well, thank you very much. I got to tell you guys, so I shared an embarrassing story about Cody a couple of minutes ago. I'll share what will likely turn into an embarrassing story during this live stream. So I am currently on my third replacement laptop in a week. Computers and I have not been friends. And it is kind of funny because this is one of those, if it ain't broke, don't try and fix it. I've had the same laptop for the last 4 years. And for about the last year, IT has been telling me every time I had a little bit of a problem, hey, John, you need to upgrade your laptop. We aren't even supporting this one anymore. I'm like, yeah, but it's not broken. It does everything. It's working perfectly. No, you need to upgrade it. Okay, well, I upgraded it, and I'm on my third upgrade in a week. So while Cody was just doing his monologue of who he is, I lost audio for about 30 seconds. So Cody, if I disappear, just take over. Just keep on going. Anna will keep the banners going. You know what we're supposed to talk about, and I'll be back at some point. But, I'll blame IT for that. If that happens, then this will be the Cody show. Does that sound fair?
I'll try. You got big shoes to live up to, so.
You'll do great, Cody. You'll do great. So I want to start by asking the question that many parents say, which is, hey, this isn't my problem. Like, why not let my kids pay for it like I did? I have some thoughts on that. Cody, I'll start with that. Do you ever hear that from clients when you bring up I'm assuming as a financial planner that you're bringing up to your clients, hey, you should be thinking about A, B, and C. And this is clearly one of those things you're bringing up. Fair statement?
Fair statement.
Okay.
Yeah. When it comes to paying for college, every parent has their own plan, kind of or thought in mind, whether or not the parent went to college, if they had to pay for it themselves, if they got scholarships, if their parents helped them. So, I'm kind of on one end of the extreme where I plan on paying for my kids all the way through, graduate school. They want to become doctors. I have clients, very wealthy ones, that say, I get you to 18 and, best of luck to you after that. I'd say most people are somewhere in between those two, where we want to help, but there's the plan that that they're going to need to float some of the bill, have some skin in the game, so to speak.
I got it. What I'll tell you is that student loan debt isn't what it was when we were kids. Student loan cost of college tuition is not what it was. Anna, I think I have some slides here kind of on what's been happening with college debt. Can you bring that up for me? So student loan debt has tripled since 2007. So we're looking at an epidemic. And I think that, the challenge is we can say, hey, we paid for it ourselves. Everything is perfectly fine. By the way, I forgot to say, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to put them up there. So I'll show real quick. Joe Adams says, great info, John and Cody. So if you want to see your name on the screen, just say something nice about Cody or I, and I'll put your name on the screen. So thanks, Joe. Appreciate that. But guys, here's the deal. Life is not the way that it was when we were kids. We're dealing right now with an inflation epidemic. Epidemic, if that's the right word, but we're dealing with significant inflation this year. And college tuition has been in an inflationary mode for the last couple of decades. And this shows, we've literally tripled student loan debt. And that's unfathomable because people's incomes have not tripled enough to cover that. This is simply for different types of degrees. So if you've got an associate's degree, and actually I cannot see the bottom here. Let's see if I can get rid of this. Now I can see the bottom. Okay, so from the low end to the high end and then the mean monthly payment. So we're talking about $281 to $384 a month for somebody who got an associate's degree. Cody talked about the fact that, hey, if his kids want to become a doctor, then he'll pay for them all the way through to the end. Well, that's awesome, Cody, because the average monthly payment, the mean, is $1,200 a month. And the high end is $1,800 a month. And for an advanced professional degree, you're talking about a house payment. You're talking about $2,500 a month that somebody is going to be paying. That's absolutely crazy how much student loan debt has ballooned. Mm-hmm. And the reality is, I'm sorry, Cody, do you have something to add to that?
No, agreeing.
Perfect. So some thoughts about student loans, just to give you an idea, because again, this is the alternative. If you don't set aside money to pay for college, I'm going to back up. I'm going to get rid of this for a second and say it this way. Cody, tell me if you disagree. There's 3 ways to pay for college. Plan for it in advance, get somebody else to pay for it at the time, or borrow money and pay for it afterwards. So
yeah, there's, I would say if you break it down to its core, yeah, there's 3.
Yeah. So we're talking about what are your options to plan for it in advance. You absolutely have the hope, hey, my kid's going to get a scholarship for underwater basket weaving because there just aren't enough underwater basket weavers, and they're going to get a scholarship and a full ride. Maybe you're banking on a sports scholarship. Maybe you're banking on an academic scholarship or some other type of scholarship. There's money out there. So don't misunderstand. There's ways to not have anybody pay for it. But if you don't believe or you don't count on the system taking care of you, and you know that you want your children to go to college, you're either paying for it in advance or you're paying for it afterwards. And the question is, who's paying for it afterwards? And that's where these student loan debt payments come into play. The average borrower takes 20 years to repay their student loan debt. The average student loan accrues $26,000 in interest over that 20-year time frame, and up to 67% of the total cost is interest. So when you're looking at these monthly payments that are here, you're talking about a 20-year repayment plan. That's what you're potentially saddling your children with if you don't start thinking about how do I pay for college in advance. And I will tell you, I have some people who have huge college debt that has stopped them from being able to purchase a home. And it's put them in a position where if they had thought about, and some who have huge college debt and not a great profession or great income to show for it. So I think there's a lot of places we can go with this conversation. I'll encourage everybody that's watching live to post any questions or comments that you have. If you're not watching live, we'll answer those questions after the fact. So we'll be paying attention to the chat log, and feel free to post any questions. So let's dive in to what are my options and really why I should use today's dollars, especially with inflation. So Cody, I'll start by asking you that question. If you think about it, setting aside $1 today isn't, with inflation as crazy as it is, I've got to make more return on investment than than what inflation is, or I'm better off putting the money in my mattress. Am I right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Essentially, yeah, it's the longer that you're giving it, the better opportunity is. I mean, of course, you got to do better inflation, and compounding interest will definitely help. Although, yeah, currently we are dealing with, record high inflation we haven't had since 1970. But even with that, prior to that, inflation for tuition is a little bit higher than what the average inflation is just for, general groceries, whatnot. When we do planning, we use 3% for, typically all retirement expenses, but 5% for educational expenses.
Got it. And when you say that, is that what you would project the cost of education to increase, or what your return on investment is, or is it something different that you're talking about?
It's a baseline for what you expect college to increase by. Now, it's going to be different depending upon what state, if it's a private school, if it's a liberal arts school. Some might have greater or less than, but 5% being the expectation that each year it's going to grow by 5% is a pretty safe assumption.
Got it. So when you think about it, guys, what you're doing is you're the biggest thing that you're using to beat inflation by setting aside the money now is tax deference. Cody, can you explain to me that part and why it's not just about, hey, setting aside the dollar, but what some of the tax benefits are of setting aside money for a college savings plan?
So and this kind of leads into 529s. So when you're, saving, if you have money in an investment account that's not necessarily a retirement account, you are going to be paying taxes along the way. If it pays dividends, you're going to pay ordinary income tax. When you take distributions, there might be short or primarily long-term capital gains. So you're going to owe some of that back to Uncle Sam and to the state of California if you live here. There are ways that you can save where you're going to avoid any taxation. And that's what a 529 is. It's become a pretty common term, especially over the past decade. I feel it's becoming a pretty household term, but most people don't have a really solid grasp of it. A 529 just allows you to save specifically for education. And when the funds are used for qualified educational expenses, so books, room and board, tuition, it's 100% federal, state, and local tax, if applicable, free. So the sooner that you can start that, the better benefit or the greater opportunity for compounding interest. You think about your 401k, how that's grown over the past 10, 15 years. Well, now imagine having that, but not having to pay taxes on it when you take it out. That's a 529.
So my 401k, and you're a financial advisor, so you can speak to this. My 401k, I get to put money in tax-free, but when it comes out, I pay the taxes on it. Now, my Roth IRA, I put money in after tax, and when I take it out, I pay no taxes. Is that in general, am I correct?
Yes. There are things such as Roth 401ks that allow after-tax contributions, but the vast majority of Americans, if they have a 401k, they're using a pre-tax where You're getting a deduction for making a contribution now, but then you'll pay taxes when you take them out in retirement.
So compare that to a 529. Am I paying taxes now or later or both or neither?
Well, it's kind of a hybrid if you think about it. Some of the rules apply from the traditional aspect of a 401k, other parts from a Roth. So there is no tax deduction. Now, it's a big question mark because there are some states that do allow, it's not a pre-tax where you can write off, but some states do allow a tax credit for a contribution to a 529. California is not one of them. So think about it as after-tax money that's being contributed. Now, the interest and dividends that are earned, those are going to be like a Roth, 100% tax-free, should they be used for educational expenses. And I put an emphasis, I said it before, a qualified educational expense.
Okay. Got it. So let's talk about contributions for a second, because you talked about, if I put money in there, so I'm taking after tax dollars. So I've to simplify this statement, I get paid X amount of dollars, the government keeps their portion, and I get a certain amount of take home pay. You with me? Okay.
Yep.
So at that point, I've got that money that I used to pay my mortgage, I used to pay for food and groceries and electricity and all of that stuff. And I'm just taking some of that money and saying, hey, I want to put this into a college savings plan for my kid. I could put it into a savings bond if I wanted to. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, and actually, it's probably better for us to start there since I'm going that direction. Where else can I put money? I mean, do I have to put money into a 529 plan, or are there other ways to save for college?
There's a lot of different ways. 529 has kind of just become the default just because of its tax-free nature. But because of the fact that it has to be used for education, and if it's not, whatever interest has been earned, if you take that money out for anything other than a qualified educational expense, you're going to pay taxes on the interest plus an additional 10% federal penalty. So because of that, I will typically advise not to plan on funding all of your child's college expenses with the 529, because, if you're planning for Stanford and then they go to Sac State, you're going to have too much in there.
Yep.
So custodial accounts are another go-to. For my boys, I have a 529 and a custodial account. A custodial account is essentially a brokerage account that's opened up in their name, but they can't manage because they're not 18 yet. And I can buy whatever I'd like, buy shares of Apple, buy a mutual fund, an ETF, a bond. And it's taxed at the minor's tax rate. Falls under, I won't get too complex, but it falls under what's called the kiddie tax. So, at some point you'll start paying taxes at your rate, but you're getting a pretty decent cushion that's taxed about the minor's rate. Then when they turn 18, we switch it over and put it into their name. So now when they take out money, they're in school, hopefully, they don't have any earned income. So therefore, when we take distributions from it, even though it has growth, there's going to be little to no taxes owed because that's their only source of income.
Got it. So why is that better than a 529, or is a 529 better, or is it a tandem hybrid type of strategy you advise?
I wouldn't say better. I'd say tandem. It's the reason why I use it for my kids, where if, say, for instance, if my boys end up getting scholarships and we use all their 529 and we don't need as much, the custodial account, they need to buy a new car. They can do that, prior to 18. If I want to buy a car from them when they're 16, I can pull from the custodial account. If they're done with school and everything is paid off, they still have money in that account that can be used towards a down payment on their home or to kind of get their life started. So they're really good tools that I typically will advise adding both. I put the same dollar amount in both of those accounts for my kids.
Got it. So is there a limit to how much money I can put into a 529 college savings plan every month, every year, per kid? How does that work?
So 529, anyone can put money into it. Grandparents, cousins, think birthday presents, checks can get deposited right into them. There is a limit for depositor. So whoever is gifting, they can only gift the maximum. So for 2022, it's $16,000. That would be the most. Some will choose to what they call hyperfund it. And this can be appropriate. Maybe if your child, let's say you've now come into money. You have the ability to throw more money into an account. But let's say they're 12. So, okay, we didn't start it when they were 1 or 2, trying to make up for lost time. And we want to get as much in there to earning as interest as much as possible. You can do a one-time 5-year contribution. So whatever the gift amount max is for that year, multiply that by 5. That's how much you can put in. But it means you can't put any more in for the next 5 years. But it's a way that you can put a substantial amount in to get it started if we're doing it later on.
Got it. Okay. So per contributor is the limit. So can you put in the cap and then your wife put in up to the cap and you could double that every year?
You could. You both can put in that. Something also you'll need to keep in mind is each policy or each issuer does have a max of how much can be put into the 529. Now, it's a pretty high dollar amount, but there's no set amount. Every plan has a different allotment. Typically, they range from $350,000 to $450,000. Okay. So something to keep in mind if, we're planning on medical school and Harvard or Yale is on the docket. Definitely can't have it all there.
Got it. So now I have 3 kids. You have 2. I want to, first of all, Cody, this is my desire to help you fund as much college 529 plans as you can. So please feel free to contribute to my children's 529 plan, since that, you don't have to be family, do you?
You don't have, you can be anybody.
Yes. Cody just said it. He's now going to contribute to my kids' college fund. Thank you, Cody. Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, just don't let Ameriprise know conflict of interest and everything. But yeah, sure, why not?
Okay, I'm just kidding. But it's per contributor. Is it per child?
It is per child. So each kid can have their own 529. Something really special about it is, let's say in your case, because I know your oldest is very bright. Let's say she ends up getting a full scholarship. She's going to go to Duke. She does not need any of that 529. Mm-hmm. You can take her portion of the 529 and move it to one of your other kids' 529s. And there's no penalty. There's no tax for doing so. Just have to keep it within the same plan. So if you're using Columbia funds, it needs to stay with Columbia.
Got it. So first of all, I hope my kids don't watch this because I think you called my other 2 kids dumb.
I didn't know. For our last conversation, and she's your oldest. So she's the closest to college.
Okay. I got to give you a hard time, Cody. Excuse me. So I can share the money to another child. So I can contribute up to the maximum, and I can say, hey, I've got money coming in for each of my 3 children, but I can contribute up to that max of $400,000 per kid. I've got $1.2 million. Again, I think, guys, there is a limit where you say, hey, I think I put in too much and I'm never going to spend this money. But I could theoretically do that and then split it up into 1 or 2 of the other 2 kids, right? Yep. Okay. But what happens if they don't go to college? Like at that point, now, I put $1 million in here and only one of my kids went to college and it costs $300,000. So I've got $700,000 left over. Obviously, I'm using absurd numbers. Now what? So
difficult conversation with the advisor. You have a few options. So for one is, we can close it out, whether taking out a portion or, completely closing it out. We would assess how much is interest and what's principal and then calculate, okay, what is it that we expect that we're gonna have to pay in taxes? The other is, let's say that there's a decent age spread. So now with, if we're talking about, we passed it on where, our youngest is done with school, didn't need it, but our oldest is maybe 10 years older and is getting married, maybe starting a family. With 529s, you have the ability, typically within the plans, to move them up 1 or down 1, meaning that if you or Sean wanted to go back to school, you could use the funds or pass them on to the grandkids.
Got it. So up 1 tier of the family tree or down 1 tier of the family tree.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, staying in that immediate household family, they call it.
Got it. Okay. Well, that's awesome. So we talked about kids sharing a 529 plan. I think we talked about this. Do I need to open a plan for each child? So so here's the question. What's the right strategy? Like, is there a benefit? Hey, my oldest is 14 and I'm not going to contribute more than the cap that I could give to her. So should I just give it all to her and then let it trickle down to the next one? Is that simplest? Is it easiest to to balance them all three? Do you really, is there any general advice you can give in that regard?
It's going to be on a client basis. Each one's going to look a little bit different. There's no real issue with just having one, with the intent of, we're going to fund as much of college that we can from it. And then when we get to the last kid, if it's all gone, then we're pulling from other sources. When it comes to that, though, one thing that I'm going to look at is what's the age gap in the kids. Mm-hmm. So let's say you've got, a 4 and a 16-year-old, a really decent age gap. Well, you're not going to want to invest that 16-year-old's money that aggressively because the funds are going to be starting to be used in the near future. And in that case, we might not even be looking at a 529, might not even be worth, looking at. But for the 4-year-old, we've got time on our side. We can be a little bit more aggressive. So maybe we're looking to fund that to be a little bit more growth oriented, and then wait and see until they go to school. We can always pull if the market does fantastic and we need money. We can pull from it and pay for our older daughter, or wait and see. And at the end of it, now they also do have the ability that some of it can be used towards paying off student debt.
Got it. So I'm thinking about myself here. This conversation came up because my wife and I were talking to Cody a couple weeks ago about student loan or student college funding for our kids, and trying to figure out, we've got a 14-year-old, a 13-year-old, and a 10-year-old, and trying to figure out where are we putting the money. And so the question is, theoretically, Cody, because the thing I keyed in on that I didn't understand until this conversation today is the principal can be pulled out without any penalty or tax consequence, correct?
Correct.
So theoretically, I could take the one-time 5-year multiple and put that money in the account for my oldest. And hey, the stock market is certainly on a dip right now. I've got 4 years before she's going to start going to college. And so I throw that money in there right now, and that money, goes up by 40%. Well, the truth is, the only thing I have to worry about is that she spent that 40% growth over 4 years, 10% per year. Again, I'm using just simple math here. I have to only worry about, is she going to spend that, or are my other kids going to spend that? Because I can take that lump sum that I had put in, and if she doesn't use it for college, I can pull that back out and there's no consequence, correct?
I would verify with your CPA, because typically it's done pro rata so that you can't pick and choose what you're pulling out. Same thing like with an investment account. If you own a mutual fund and you bought it and it's gone up, when you place a sell order, some of it will be principal, but some of it is going to be interest.
I got it. Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. Again, maybe I just have the crazy mind that's trying to work the system every way I possibly can, but that makes perfect sense. You're not simply withdrawing or selling the interest that has grown. So you're selling half of your portfolio. And so you've got a cost basis on that. And we won't go down that road, but okay, that makes perfect sense. So let's talk about, actually, I'm going to go here first. We're going to talk about the state plans. Super confusing to me. When my wife and I started looking into this, it's like, okay, what? Like, I just want a 529 plan, but there's different rules. There's different benefits from the best I could tell. And I'm probably going to say something stupid right now because I thoroughly do not understand why every state has their own plan or what the difference is. All I know is that every once in a while when I talk to somebody, they're like, oh my gosh, you need to use blankety blank state. Really? Because the only state I know right now is confusion. This does not make sense.
To make it as simple as possible, the state's pretty much irrelevant which option you choose. So if you think about all the different mutual fund carriers out there, Columbia, Fidelity, John Hancock, they all offer 529 plans, but they have to conform to some states' laws. So what's happened is pretty much each state uses a different carrier. So if you have a preference for the carrier, say I want to use Fidelity, okay, you're going to use the New Hampshire or Arizona plan. If you want to use Columbia, it's going to be South Carolina. California is one of the few that actually no longer has an advisor-led 529 plan. It was turned over to ScholarShare. It's a little bit different. We typically don't recommend them, and because I can never work with them. There's limited options, but picking the plan, it's really irrelevant what state you're choosing unless you have perhaps relatives that live in that state and that state offers a tax deduction for contributions to it. So perhaps Arizona or South Carolina, where they might offer, hey, Aunt Sally wants to throw $10,000 into it. She lives in South Carolina, open up the South Carolina plan. I have never recommended or advised or been in the situation where that was the case. We've always just gone with, what fund carrier has the best options, and use theirs. You do not have to go to school in that state. It can be used in any state in the U.S. It can even be used over abroad. Some states, will have higher limits to how much total can go in. Some have more investment options, some have less, and that's really more so what kind of plays into it.
Okay. So let's pretend Aunt Sally wants to give a bunch of money and she's in Arizona, and Grandma is in South Carolina, and Grandma wants to give a bunch of money. And theoretically, for this example, let's pretend South Carolina and Arizona both have state tax credits. Can one child have a plan, two different plans in two different states?
Yes, they can.
Okay. Got it. But you're still subject to the same overall contribution limit. So you can't say, hey, I'm going to give 16,000 from Grandma and 16. Actually, I guess you can, because the contribution limit's based on the donor.
Correct. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. I'll figure this out before the end of the hour. Maybe. Okay. Guys, by the way, this isn't for you. It's for me. I just figured the easiest way for me to get Cody to answer my questions is to put him on TV. So here we are, and I could care less about the rest of you. Okay. I'm just kidding. All right. So Cody, you just answered this question, but clarify this. So I've got, I've got a 529 plan. My kid wants to go to study abroad, and they want to go to school in Spain. And I want you to tie this into, you used a word earlier, and I forgot the word, but you said qualified college Okay. So is it about the college that's qualified, or is it the expense that's qualified, or both?
Yes, both. I mean, I've never run into an issue where a school, as long as they have, if they're chartered, if they're registered.
Okay.
But it's qualified educational expenses. So that's been a very vague term. And it's been, for a while, they've been working on it and been trying to identify more and more to try to be very, very specific as to what it is. There are a lot of qualified expenses. So obviously the most prevalent is going to be tuition, room and board, food, books, supplies, computer. If you really think about it, any expense that's directly related to your education is pretty safe to assume it's qualified.
How about the cost of supplies for beer pong? Because I find a lot of college students, that's a necessity to study. And so that, I think, should qualify, right?
Maybe if it's athletics and it falls under that scholarship.
Oh, that's even better. Yes.
Yeah, that was my second major in college.
Got it. Okay, so it's a qualified school. It's a qualified, and again, all schools are qualified. It's a qualified expense. Pretty much anything. Are you turning in receipts to get the money out? Is it kind of like everything with the IRS? Hey, it's all kosher until you're audited. How does it work?
So when you take that, you don't need to show, your advisor receipts, but we do recommend holding on to them. What you'll do is you'll take a distribution, deposit it to the parents' accounts, because more often than not, it's mom and dad who have the 529, and then they'll pay directly. Keep a record of what it's for, and you'll go over that with your CPA when you do your taxes, and just make sure that what you paid out covered all of what you withdrew. Got it.
Okay, so really, it's no different than the mileage log that we're supposed to keep for our car, right? Like and I say this tongue in cheek, but it's the truth. You claim what you claim, and then you better be ready when you're audited, because that's when you're going to be in trouble. And so that makes perfect sense. There's nothing I have to give you that says, hey, Cody, can you please approve this distribution? And now I got to wait for you to give the okay for me to pay for something. None of that happens. It's my prerogative to pull the money out and to be able to justify it upon audit and be able to show my CPA, hey, this was legitimate. And then I'm able to have it tax-free, correct?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So what about trade schools? So I was going to make a joke. You talked about, an accredited college, whatever term you used. now I still lost the term, but there's a school of hard knocks. That one doesn't count. But trade schools, first of all, I think trade schools are underrated over the last decade or two. People have gotten a pretty negative tone towards trade schools. And it's actually part of why we have such a major housing crisis right now of lack of homes available compared to demand, because nobody's in the trades anymore. Everybody's getting a white collar job and going to school. And so trade schools are starting to get a better reputation. So can we use this money to pay for a trade school?
You can.
Okay.
I would say out of all the 529 questions I get, this is probably one of the most common is, can this be used for a trade school? I always want to verify, but typically the answer is yes. This can be used for a trade school.
Beautiful. All right.
They've actually expanded it because, most of the time when you thought 529 specifically for university, you can actually now, as of 2020, use it for high school expenses as well. Under
what circumstances are you talking about?
So tuition. So if your kid's going to a private school that has tuition or requires that you buy books and supplies for it, there is a limit on how much you can withdraw. So, there is no limit for withdrawals for when it's a university. So, if it costs you $80,000 that year to go to Stanford, you can take $80,000 out. They put a limit for K through 12 where it's $10,000. But, if someone's going to a very, say, for instance, a boarding school, an high school, something that's going to cost more, you actually now can pull some funds from the 529.
Love it. That's interesting. Yeah, that's awesome. All right. So let's keep going down our list of questions here. So how about financial aid? Like, that's a really big question people talk about is, hey, John, my kids are going to be going to school. They're looking at my assets. They're looking at my income, especially the middle class. Like the middle class is we are all in trouble because, we make too much to qualify for aid and we don't make enough to pay for everything on our own. And when you're in that moment where you're like, hey, I think I qualify for financial aid, but they're going to look at my assets and decide, no, you don't need help because you can afford to pay for this. How does that 529 plan come into play?
So it is viewed, but doesn't carry the same weight as, say, our income does for our kids when they're applying for FAFSA. Always say verify with your CPA what will we be able to qualify for. Something key to keep in mind, whenever you're looking at the tuitions for a school, they'll always show, okay, here's X dollar amount. This is what it costs to go here. What they're showing you is the max dollar amount. That's not a guaranteed rate that you're going to pay. Actually, the vast majority of students do not pay that price. So depending upon what income, what assets you have, your tuition is actually going to be likely less than what's shown, unless it's a private or out of state. Those can have their own rules.
So is that negotiable? Like, do I need to go into my kid's college admission office or tuition office and say, hey, I want to demand a better deal? Is that what you're saying? Or is it?
You can't demand for it. I wish it was only, if you can haggle, get it done.
I'll give you $5.
You can go onto websites such as College Board, and you can take a look if there's a specific college you're looking at. It'll break down a tier based upon, what's mom and dad's income, and it'll tell you, here's what their tuition is going to be.
Okay, got it. Love it. I appreciate that. All right, great information, gang. If you're watching live, please post comments if you have any. If you're watching recorded, post comments and we'll catch them afterwards. If you are enjoying this information, please subscribe, share, and click the notification bell on YouTube so that you get notifications when we go live and when we present other amazing information. So let's talk now about, 529 is offering tax deductions. I think we covered this, but remind us again. How does tax deductions work with 529s?
So like I said before, so they're not pre-tax, so you can't, not like a traditional IRA or 401k. There's no immediate, offset of income. Some states do offer tax deductions for contributions to the plan. They are limited. Unfortunately, California is not one of them. So it's one where you'd want to talk with your advisor. Realistically, is there people that are out of state that are going to be making significant contributions to the plan? Then you may want to take that into consideration when selecting the plan. I have a default 2 that I go to because, in my opinion, they have the best investment portfolio options available. And that's what matters to me most. But if it turns out, say if they, got a relative in Nebraska, assuming that Nebraska has that, well, maybe we should take a look at Nebraska's plan then.
Got it. That makes perfect sense. So we talked about this. I'm going through a couple of the questions we have just to make sure we're not reiterating things. So Cody, again, I think we covered it, but this one's really important to say succinctly. When should I start a 529 plan? Let's kind of start from there. And then when is it too late?
So I'll use me as an example, as an extreme, just because I'm a nerd and that's what I do. I opened Jameson and Zachary, my boys' 529s, the day I received their Social Security card in the mail.
Okay.
That's the fastest that you can start one up. Is
okay.
You got to have their Social Security number, just because I understand and value the aspect of compounding interest. I want to give it as much time as possible. The sooner the better. If we do wait too long, again, we're hoping for compounding growth, and to get compounding growth, ideally we need to be in the market, not in bonds, not in cash. The closer that we're getting to, your child actually going to school, we're going to be needing to take some risk off the table. Actually, one of the investment options, if you've ever heard of target date funds in your 401ks, or you basically take your birth year, add 65 or 67, depending upon the company, gives you a year. That's the fund that you're going into, give or take a couple of years. They do that same strategy for 529s. It's an option available. So you can say it's, if they were born this year, it might be the 2040 plan. It could be the 2036 plan. And it's basing it upon when is the child going to turn 18. So it'll start off more aggressive. The closer we get to that, it'll start going more conservative. So starting it later just means that, hey, we're really not going to see the huge value of putting the money in if we're going to be conservative. So it kind of forces us to be more aggressive and then understanding the risk. So, and if that's not what we're ideally wanting to do, then, we'll find a different solution.
And that's where maybe a custodial account or something like that might be a better plan.
Custodial account, there is another great option I've done for one of my clients who, same kind of thing, that they hadn't really done much for college planning, but they're affluent, they've saved a lot, and they ended up putting a good amount just in Apple over the years. And if you've tracked Apple or pretty much anything over the last 12 years, they've done very well. So they have now in an account a lot of my clients, a large amount of growth, and we don't want to touch it because if we do, we're going to pay taxes on it. Well, what you can do if your child's 18 is let's start with the most appreciated. So what's the lowest basis that you got? So you bought it for $10. It's now worth $100. Let's gift that to your child. You're not going to get any taxes. You're giving it to your kids. It falls under the lifetime gift exemption. Now have your child sell it, not you. It's going to be taxable to them. But hopefully they don't have a job. They're going to pay little to no tax versus you'd pay a lot of tax.
Got it. Yeah. That's a great strategy. And I think that, that's where having an expert like Cody really comes into play, because we all can Google anything. You can Google, hey, I've got this weird spot on my arm. What does it mean? Oh my gosh, I'm going to die tomorrow, right? Like anything that you look up online, you have to take with a grain of salt, and maybe even the entire salt shaker. Like all advice is based on your particular circumstances. And you guys hear me say this all the time when I talk about advice about credit, advice about your mortgage. It's no different than the advice you get from a doctor when your best friend had high blood pressure and the doctor gave them a particular pill to take, and you started taking your blood pressure down at the local pharmacy and you realize, oh my gosh, my blood pressure's high. You call your friend, right? You say, hey friend, tell me, what was that pill that you took? Oh yeah, it's a prescription. Cool. Do you have any more left? I'll take some. Yeah, that's the quickest way to have an adverse reaction to medicine and die. So don't take somebody else's medicine. Don't take the advice that worked for somebody else, because the ailments that you have, the conditions that affect you are different than the conditions that affected that other person. Something that heals them could kill you. Something that's a great idea for that person on how they save for their college fund might be the worst plan for you based upon your financial circumstances, the intentions for your children and when they're going to be going to college, and what the backup plan is if they don't, as well as how much time you have on your side. So that's where having an expert like Cody really comes into play. And magically, in like 4 seconds, you're going to see Cody's information pop up right on the top of the screen, and it's hands-free. It's just going to happen without me doing anything. It just pops up. I think it happens. So that's really who you should be talking to when you're thinking about any kind of investments. But Cody is amazing at everything. Today, he's my expert on college savings plans, but he runs the entire gamut. So I don't want you to think that this is all he does, but it certainly gives him an opportunity to showcase his area of expertise. All right, Cody, let's look at, all right, what costs can a 529 be used to cover? Again, we kind of talked about this, but I think it'd be nice to reiterate it again. Specifically, what can I pay for using a 529 plan?
So the go-tos, think tuition, room and board, off-campus housing. I didn't mention that. That can also be included. Books, supplies, computers. I mean, really, if you don't have to negotiate or debate, did you really need that? No, I needed a room. I needed tuition. I needed housing. I needed food, all that stuff. Those are directly related. If it's when it gets beyond that, talk with an advisor, talk with your CPA. But I'd say that situations like that are going to make up less than 1% of the case.
What about travel expenses? What about, hey, my kid genuinely is going to go to, Hawaii and go to school in Hawaii. Well, you can't drive there. You got to fly. They fly home for Christmas. They fly home for Thanksgiving. Is travel expenses considered a qualified expense in your opinion?
That is such a good question because it is and it is not.
Okay. Tell me why it is.
So, and again, for things like this, you need to consult with your CPA. For some areas of the country, for some schools, then yes, that's considered transportation that, getting to and from school. If you were to say, go to do a semester in Italy, no, that won't be included. Your tuition at that school in Italy, the room, housing, so long as it's there. When you get into the going to school abroad, it's not as robust of a list as what is a qualified educational expense. So where some things may apply if you go to here in the US, some won't apply if you go abroad. But travel by airplane can be included. Gasoline, no. Sorry, that one's not.
Okay. How about college tours? Can I use that for, hey, my kid is, I'm in high school, they're going to go to college. I've got the expense to look at colleges. Again, I'm stretching a little bit here, but I'm just curious. Like, to me, that seems like a reasonable expense because I'm going to check out the colleges. Any thoughts?
So, first time I've actually ever been asked that question.
Yes.
So that is, I will give you my opinion, but I'd have to say it's not a fact. Got to double check this one.
Yeah.
My intellect says no, that would not. Because let's say your daughter wants to go to NYU, and I know you live here in the local area. Well, why didn't you just go look at UC Davis? Why'd you have to go look at NYU? Why look at, going to any other school outside of the state, going further away? It's a little bit different when you're actually there. So then you have the obligation to pay them versus I'm going to look at it. And also, who's to actually say, well, we wanted to do a family trip to Manhattan, so we went and toured one school, and it was a qualified expense. So
I got it.
I would say no, but hey, great question. Never been asked that. Maybe ask your CPA.
I am with you. Well, just for the record, Joe wanted to make it clear that he's an Ags fan. So there you go.
I knew he was in the call, so I had to throw out something for UC Davis.
Love it. All right. So let's keep going here. By the way, my new computer struck, so I probably missed about 30 seconds of what you said because my audio went dead, but it's back. And your timing is perfect because you stayed perfectly on there. All right. So I want to make sure we're covering the stuff that's critical here. So a custodial or UTMA account, is that the same thing we were talking about before? Or is that something different?
So and just to summarize, to put it in the simplest sense, think if you're going to use them for college, 529 tax-free must be used for college. Custodial account, a little tax, but does not have to be used for college.
Okay, but and so custodial account has a little bit of tax. I guess it's just risk tolerance and, hey, am I better off paying some tax but having flexibility versus paying no tax and having less flexibility? That's really what you're saying.
Yeah. Having more flexibility. Actually, something I did not mention earlier. So if you're in a 529, you have to be in a mutual fund. There's no other option. You must be in a mutual fund, and you must be in a mutual fund that's run by that company. So, I use the South Carolina plan a lot with Columbia funds. They've got one of the best lineups. It's, very robust. Your investment options are limited to Columbia. If you use Fidelity, you use John Hancock, you use American funds, their plan, you are stuck. You have to find which ones you want or several of the funds you want within their plan. Within a custodial account, it's completely open. You want to buy Apple, you want to buy an ETF, you want to buy an individual bond. Literally, the sky's the limit. You can own that in the UTMA.
Got it. And define UTMA. What does it mean? What does it stand for?
Uniform Transfer to Minor Account. There's also the CUTMA, the California Uniform Transfer to Minor Account.
Okay, got it. All right. You said something a minute ago, and I want to clarify. And you said if I go with a particular program, John Hancock, I'm stuck with their fund. Can I move money from one custodian, I'm using the wrong word here, from one state program to another? Can I transfer that and then have a different set of mutual funds to pick from?
Yeah, it's something that I've done a few times, and it's typically because, hey, John, you started doing this on your own. You did it with Fidelity, and you put in a couple $100 here or there. And hey, we have $1,000 in it, but we want to work with you, Cody, and we want to start adding to it. Okay, then let's put in a transfer. We'll open up a new one, and I can have the funds moved from that plan to the new plan. No taxes, no penalty.
Got it. Okay, perfect. Few remaining questions we've got here. Can I use a 529 to cover graduate school?
Yes, you can.
Beautiful. What about using my 401k or my IRA to pay for my kids to go to school?
Probably up there with the least attractive options when it comes to paying for school. So if you're pulling from your traditional 401k, if you're under 59 and a half or under 55, depending upon a couple of different rules, you're going to pay penalties on top of income tax, in addition to income tax, I should say, for taking funds out. And also the goal of that fund is retirement, so it's one thing. You shouldn't really be mixing the two. There are some that will use a Roth IRA, because within a Roth IRA, it's one, obviously you want to speak with your advisor or your accountant, whoever helps you with your investments, but there are ways that you can pull from a Roth IRA and use it to fund education, and there's no penalty or taxes.
Got it. Okay.
But that's a different can of worms. That's something you want. Feel free to hit me up if you have an advisor, CPA, talk with them about doing that.
Beautiful. Appreciate that. All right. So as we get to our last couple of questions, again, magically here in a moment, Cody's information will float at the top, so you can hit me up. So we'll hit Cody up. Cody, can I use a 520? Can my kids use a 529 plan to pay off student loans?
So the answer used to be no. But when the former president signed the Secure Act back in 2019, went into effect, part of that allowed for using funds to pay off college debt. So I believe it's set at $10,000. There is still there's some weeds to go through on that, where it's still, each state's going to be a little bit different. For anything complex like this, talk with your advisor and bring your CPA in on that, just to guarantee that you can. I would say also in the student debt, I'm not sure if that question is coming up. A question that I'll get is, what if my kid gets a full scholarship? What if they get, a grant? There you go. Let's say that they're getting a $5,000 grant from, Summit Funding is just so nice, and they're going to give Jameson $5,000 for school. Thank you so much.
Way to go, Cody.
You're able to actually take that equal dollar amount out of the 529. No tax, no penalty, no issue, to offset what came out of that. Not many people know that. Not many advisors talk about that, actually.
So really, now you said something earlier And you mentioned that my 14-year-old is way smarter than my other kids. That's not what you said, but I'm giving you a hard time. And so you said, hey, if she's going to get a full ride scholarship, I don't need to put money into her plan. But compare that to what you're saying now. So if I put money into a plan for her, and let's pretend she was my only child, and she gets a full ride scholarship, I can take the dollars that she got from the scholarship and take that same amount out of the 529 plan without penalty?
Yes.
So I really, it's a good investment plan if I think my kid's going to get a scholarship, to put the money in there anyway, because I have the backup plan that I'm not losing out. As long as she went to school, if the scholarship pays for it, I can take that money back out at that time.
Yeah, I mean, no one, I don't think anyone should realistically plan on getting an athletic or academic scholarship. They happen, but the government understands a little bit, and they know that, well, you can't hope for something for 18 years, and then when it comes, it alter your plan completely, that, I fell into this windfall. No, that's why they add that.
I got it. But we are trying to get my daughter into golf, figuring that, hey, golf scholarship, I don't know. We're trying, if you know any sports that are underrepresented in college, especially for females, let me know. We'll try and get her into it and see if we can get her a scholarship for that. Right, Cody?
Women's wrestling.
There you go. Women's wrestling.
I have a cousin.
Right. Yeah. Not sure if that's going to happen, but I'll let you call my daughter and ask her. All right. And then the last one, this is really our last question. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to post them now. If you're live, if you're watching recorded, please post your questions or reach out to Cody or I directly. What if I need the money in an emergency for something else? I know, and I'll preface this because people think about 401k plans, and that there are some circumstances where financial hardship or, hey, I'm using it to buy a house and I get some relief from some of the penalties. And I don't even know if those are still true. I don't know if they were ever true, but there's urban legend around all of that being the case when it comes to retirement investing. So can you speak to that when it comes to a 529 plan?
Yeah, we want to discuss what the emergency is, but it's pretty safe to assume that if it's not going towards college or offsetting, tuition or debt, we're going to be paying taxes and a penalty.
Got it. Now, if you think, actually, I have a kind of specific question, but you think about, you said trade school, but as an example, somebody wants to become a real estate agent. There's certain classes you have to take before you can take your real estate exam. So really going to college at any point and taking any amount of classes, it's, even if you don't get a degree, the tuition for college as you went to school is all covered and applicable. It's not contingent upon completion. Is that accurate?
Yeah. So you can go to college and have a fantastic time and be paid for and not graduate or trade school or whatever the case may be. But no, yeah,
not sure that's a strategy either. But it's a question that
not a strategy, but it's not it's not contingent on you graduating or even actually for that matter, if you think of scholarships, typically athletic or academic are going to require that you maintain a certain GPA and set by that school and set by your scholarship. C's get degrees apparently, and they'll still let you take the distributions out of the 529 to cover that C student.
Love it. Love it. Cody, I appreciate your time today. Guys, we've spent a good portion of this hour talking with an amazing advisor locally here, Cody O'Keefe, who is super good at everything. He's helped a lot of my colleagues and clients and friends, and he's amazing. So if you have questions about college planning, if you have questions about any type of financial planning, Cody is a great option to talk to. Cody, you got about a minute or so of any closing remarks. So what would you say to somebody if you only had 1 minute to talk to somebody about college saving, what is the most important thing you want them to know?
Where are they going to go to school, and making sure that the parents have a say-so in where they're going? Because as you showed earlier, yes, student debt is very high. I'd say it has a lot to do with my generation because a lot of us are first or second. I'm happy to be third, but that's kind of the rarity. If your child is going to be getting a liberal arts degree, why are you sending them to NYU? It's okay to be realistic. And now, because of the fact that college degrees have become such a mandatory issue, where you went doesn't carry as much weight as it perhaps used to, unless you're in certain fields. So I think that parents should be very involved with setting expectations realistic, how much we're paying for college and how much we're actually going to let you take out in student debt. Because you as the parent can control to say, I'm not going to let you take on $200,000 of student debt unless you're getting your doctorate. That's where the conversation needs to start. And then from there, build upon what is it that we're going to need to cover, where are they going to go, and from there formulate a plan. And that's, myself or any financial advisor or planner should be able to assist with.
Got it. Well, I appreciate that, Cody. Hopefully I didn't scare you when I disappeared, but I wanted to give you the spotlights. So thank you again for your time today. We are right up at the top of the hour. Thanks everybody for joining me. If you have any questions, give us a holler, and we'll see you next week for our continued Financial Friday broadcast. Have a good afternoon and enjoy your weekend.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Bye-bye.